I wanted to do a little talk on changing times and some of my own memories about how life has changed. I'll go back to about the early 1980s. I was doing security at Bell Labs, and that's where they invented the transistor. And what happened is prior to the transistor, if somebody listened to a radio, it would be in their house, and the radio might be 8 or 10 or 12 pounds heavy. And if you took off the back of the radio, you would see a bunch of picture tubes on the radio, and they would be lighted up like Christmas tree lights. And what the Bell Labs, where I worked, it was in Murray Hill, New Jersey, they had developed the transistor, and somebody was able to take a little transistor radio and be on the beach and pull out the antenna and listen to the radio right on the beach. And the radio would only maybe weigh a quarter of a pound or a half a pound. It was almost nothing. And because of this innovation, they developed this transistor, and there was a printed circuit in the radio, which was the precursor to what is now computer chips. But it all started with the transistor. And today, of course, we have the computers and the cell phones and so forth and so on. When I was younger, too, they had Flash Gordon, which was a TV superhero type, and he had a wristwatch where he could talk to somebody in the next room or half a block away, and it was considered amazing. Today we can take a cell phone and talk across the world to another country, and there's no wires or no nothing. At that time, with Flash Gordon, with his little things, he would talk into his wristwatch. People thought that was amazing. And when I was younger, there was prop planes. They had a propeller, and they didn't go very fast, and they didn't go very far. And today, of course, there's jet planes and planes that go 1,500 miles an hour, and rockets are going into space, and people are going to the moon. And at one point, I remember I was a little kid in New York City, and we were talking about, would anybody ever go to the moon? How would they breathe? How would they eat? How would they get back? What about breathing air? All these questions, like this was a fantasy. And now it's been years since people have traveled to the moon. Now today, you have people, everybody's carrying cell phones, and a mother was talking to a child, and the child was watching TV. He says, "What's that, Mommy?" And she said, "That's a telephone booth." I said, "What's a telephone booth?" And that's a booth that you went into the booth and you closed the door, and it had a little wire on it, and you put money in like a coin box, and you were able to make a telephone call. Really? Why didn't they just use their cell phone? Because there was no cell phones. So it shows you how far things have really come. You go to a doctor's office, and he's carrying a laptop with him, and as he's talking to you, he's putting things into the laptop. And he wants to order medicine, and he presses a button, and instead of writing a prescription, he now put in a request at your local pharmacy. Years ago in the medical field, a doctor, an old-time doctor, would just have a blood test or a urine test, and then it was his best opinion what was wrong with you. They might take an x-ray, that's all they had. And today they have the MRIs, the CAT scans, the ultrasounds, and so forth. And technology is now taking over the world. They have cars that drive themselves. People send faxes from one area to another. There was a commercial on TV years ago where somebody can send a fax from the beach to somebody remotely, and people are ordering things online. And the post office is even saying, don't buy stamps, do us online. And you go to the checkout counter of the supermarket, and these UPC scanners, and before in the past when I was a little kid, they would maybe have 15 cashiers in a busy supermarket. Now they might have 4 or 5 or whatever, and they use the UPC and they do it instantly. Where before you had to figure out each sale individually and the price and punch it in and so forth and so on. And this is how the world is changing. And in Star Wars, there was this big thing about drones and everything else. Well, we've arrived. Drones are here. We sent drones to Afghanistan and Iraq, and sooner or later, the wars of the future will be fought just like Star Wars. Star Wars is here today. It's not a thing of the future. It's a thing of now. This is the world of tomorrow today, with the faxes and the cell phones and the computers and the medical advances and the cars that drive themselves and the drones and so forth and so on. It's almost endless, and it keeps on going. It's continuing wherever you go. That's why there's so much less jobs. People either have to drive a vehicle or be security or cut grass or be some kind of a manager or supervisor, because a lot of the manual jobs are gone. In the factories, they have robots. They have robotics that are putting everything together. There used to be several hundred people in factories. And you would think if they had manufacturing back, that would improve the jobs, but not really. And even with the cars, today they don't call them mechanics, they call them techs. They put a little computer under the dash and they can see what's wrong with the car, so they're actually technicians. So the world has become more technically advanced. You can either have a laboring class, like people that cut grass or driving a bus or a tractor trailer, or people that are housekeeping or actually making food, which is still a manual job, cooking the eggs and so forth, restaurants and whatever, or else people are going to be very technical. They may be a plumber where they have to learn plumbing, or an electrician where they have to learn electrical work, or there'll be a computer operator, or there'll be some kind of an engineer or a doctor. But the diagnosis is getting more like the machines are doing it, the CAT scans, the MRIs, with of course, the evaluation by a trained MD. But this is the way the world is going. The guesswork out of medicine, like when I was a child, it was a person's best opinion what was wrong with somebody. He didn't really have a method other than his own experience. The best doctors were just the ones with the most experience. And now it's the ones who are technically more advanced. And the technology is spread all over the world. It's a different world. That's why I say it's the world of tomorrow today, because it's already now, and in the future it's going to be expanding. And then you look at a country like North Korea, it's shooting off missiles. Years ago it was a very backward country. But when you look at the Korean War, you look at China and Korea were actually on the same side. And I feel today that China is actually backing Korea. And just because China is being very silent, don't overlook its alliances with other people and the potential for what they'll do if things come to snuff, you know. We're not so sure. Why would they be on our side? They were on North Korea's side during they call it the Korean conflict. But enough people died in it to be considered a war. So I'm just giving some perspectives on things. I call it the world of tomorrow today, because you can see the changes. Cars are going to be driving themselves. Drones are going to be fighting wars. People are going to outer space. People are going to take tours to outer space as a vacation to probably another world. another planet. And then we might find out if there's actually what they call other civilizations, other what we would call Martians or aliens or whatever. So it might be a different planet, naturally not Mars, but it may be somewhere else. And that's going to be the world of tomorrow. I think it's going to be space and different civilizations. I've always been convinced that there is something else out there. We're not the end of it all.